Hello, late October 2022. Still here on Mother Earth, watching the planets as they appear to travel around us. Focusing today on Saturn. Transiting Saturn has been in Aquarius for 2.5 years, and next March it will leave Aquarius and move into Pisces. Neptune will still be in Pisces when Saturn enters it next March. Jupiter will have re-entered Aries. It presently is retrograding back into Pisces, but it will be in Aries when Saturn moves into Pisces. And of course, Pluto makes that dramatic entry into Aquarius at approximately the same time that Saturn moves into Pisces. 3 years. Saturn will be in Pisces 3 years. It takes approximately 30 years to make that one cycle around the sun. 3 years per side. Saturn is the planet that symbolizes our forms and structures. Saturn symbolizes discipline and traditional systems. Saturn is karmic as well. It indicates responsibility and disciplined perspectives, traditional ways of doing things. But definitely Saturn symbolizes the structures themselves, our buildings, our governmental systems, our borders. So when Saturn enters Pisces, what we see historically, usually when Saturn enters Pisces, is dissolving borders, especially historically between Russia and the Ukraine, Russia and Poland, and Russia and Yugoslavia. The borders of Russia and other countries are fluid, man-made things. And when Saturn, the planet of bridges and fences and borders and structures, when it moves into Pisces, the sign of undoing and restless energy and moving, watery energy, very, very imaginative and illusionary. This is Pisces. Swimming 2 ways at once. Whereas Saturn likes to have everything in a row, very organized, very efficient. So when it first enters Pisces, we'll see Pisces things and their structures and forms that we have in these Pisces things dissolve. Pisces things, we're talking about the health system. We're talking about health in general. We're talking about the entertainment industry. We're talking about music and art in all forms. We're talking about alcohol and drugs. Neptune is also simply water, liquids. It's also, again, illusion and the media and, what shall we say, lack of dishonesty. Neptune can play a very strong role in that as well, and Neptune, of course, is the ruler of Pisces, so when we talk about Neptune, we're also talking about Pisces. And Saturn's going to start influencing Pisces things. Now, after we see the dissolving of the borders and the structures in our world, then during the next 3 years, we're going to see rules and ethics and structure being rebuilt and brought into these Pisces things. So a new health system, new rules, new ethics, new structures coming into the picture. Big pharma and the opiates. Maybe some responsibility taken there, because Saturn is also karmic responsibility. That's the planet that symbolizes that energy in our lives. It's always interesting to look at the past history, and when Saturn was in Pisces way back, several cycles back, 1935, that's when the Alcoholics Anonymous, a very important society structure and system that started there that has been quite effective for decades. So during this period when Saturn's traveling through Pisces, again, we'll see new forms. First, we'll see the structures and the systems themselves dissolve. It's like form moving into water and liquid and dissolving. And then as we get through further into the sign with Saturn in Pisces, we see these things being rebuilt with ethics, with discipline, with sobriety and accountability, because Saturn is sobriety and accountability. And it's moving into a very elusive sign. It's not usually an easy time for many, many people. Pisces is the sign of suffering. Saturn is a planet of karma. And during Saturn's present, anytime it's traveling through Pisces, we see a great deal of suffering on the planet. So in March of 23 through until 2026, Saturn will be traveling through Pisces. When it finally leaves Pisces, it will leave Pisces with Neptune hand in hand. They'll move into Aries together. But first it has to complete its journey through Aquarius, and then next March start its journey through Pisces. Looking again at the history. If we look at the history of the entertainment industry, we see that in 1935, the first Technicolor Mickey Mouse movie happened. From black and white to Technicolor. That was a big shift in the movie industry. In 1993 to 95, Saturn was back in Pisces again, and that's when DVDs manifested in our world. And we saw cassette tapes fade away and DVDs start to come into the picture. And of course, they have faded away now. So what will be the new form that will manifest in this part of the world of entertainment? We'll have to wait and see. Another interesting thing, we saw some canned food coming into the picture. Never before we saw commercial canned food being available when Saturn was in Pisces in 1935. We also saw Amelia Earhart travel over the Atlantic, the first solo flight for a woman. In 1995, when it was in Pisces, Saturn again, we saw a Senate hearing on violence and especially violent videos and the effect that these were having on people's minds. Of course, that faded away into significance fairly quickly too. But these ethics and these rules and this taking responsibility and being accountable with Pisces things, this is what usually manifests when Saturn travels through Pisces, as well as a lot of suffering and shifting energies in a variety of places. If we look at the 1993 to 96 pass, that was when the Oklahoma City federal building bombing took place. And certainly during the next 3 years, the USA seems to be vulnerable and ripe for more self-destruction. Self-hatred almost. One part and faction of the country always at hatred and wanting to go to war with the other faction of the country. Well, this manifested in a big way when Saturn was traveling through Pisces in 1990s. All water issues are going to be a big focus for us. The lack of water, the lack of clean water, either too much water with flooding or drought, not enough water. The control of water, again, Saturn, rules and regulations developing in various governmental agencies handling water. Should water be free? Some big issues that are going to be dealt with during the 3 years that Saturn travels through Pisces. So, a variety of extremes usually happen when Saturn is in Pisces. One of the ways we saw in the 90s when Saturn was there, extreme suffering was with the Rwanda massacre, because that's what occurred at that time as well. And there was war going on. Russia was involved with Bosnia and Chechnya. So as we go into this period, sobriety and accountability, that's what will be required. Not easy things to hear, but that's the picture when Saturn travels through Pisces. Now, one of the things to point out is Pisces, when Saturn's traveling through this sign, people who have planets in Pisces in their birth chart, or people who have the sun in Pisces at birth, Saturn will at some point in its 3-year journey travel right over top of the sun or right over top of people's Pisces planets, and potentially bringing in either some serious commitment and focus or some serious restrictive karmic circumstances. The sign that Saturn is traveling through brings either serious focus or stress to the people who have dominant planets in their charts in that sign that Saturn is traveling through. Pisces, however, we have the sign opposite Pisces, Virgo. So during the next 3 years, Saturn will also be opposite Virgo. And Virgo people will be lacking in energy and have disappointing circumstances, not for 3 years straight, but at different points in that 3-year journey. And during this 3-year period, Saturn will be squaring Neptune planets and squaring Sagittarius planets. So for the last 3 years, continuing until next spring, Saturn has brought its focus and its energy into Aquarius people's lives and Leo people's lives, and with the squares, Taurus and Scorpio. But during the next 3 years, Saturn will be bringing some either potential serious focus and determined effort, concentrated, disciplined effort, or karmic restrictions to, again, these signs that are being influenced. Of course, we're all influenced by Saturn's presence in Pisces, but in a personal way, this is what we're looking for in a given chart. One other thing I wanted to mention today. Often when we see Saturn in Pisces, we see Uranus in Taurus. Historically, the two of them are in those two signs and at the same time. So if we go back to the 1930s, when Saturn was in Pisces and people were indeed having hard times, Uranus was also in Taurus then. What we've noticed is Uranus is only in Taurus once every 84 years. And when it is, women make progress in terms of their rights and their freedoms, bit by bit by bit. There's always an increase to more freedom for women when Uranus is in Taurus. And then you have to wait 84 years to see that again, that energy coming through. If we're looking at women's issues, it's interesting to me that while Uranus is in Taurus right now, we're seeing the women of Iran becoming very, very determined to acquire some freedoms, basic freedoms. We're seeing issues around abortion and basic freedoms for women in the US of A as well, especially in the southern states, where women seem to be voluntarily giving up their freedoms. But it's certainly a time of shifting and focus. If again we look at the history of Uranus in Taurus, in the 30s, this is when women started to be allowed out of the kitchen and into the factories because they were required to make bombs. The men were all away in Europe fighting the war, the Second World War. So in the 1930s, women made progress. They started becoming out of the kitchen and into factories where they developed some freedoms. They didn't want to give it back when the men came back from war. But that little bit of improvement, that little bit of direction towards freedom was established there. It's interesting, the time before that, when Uranus was in Taurus, was in 1850, 1851. And this is when we saw the very first women's rights issues conference. It took place in Ohio. No progress was made in the world for women. Women didn't have the vote then. No rights really at all legally then, or very few. The legal vote, of course, did not come to women until 1920. In Britain, it was in 1928. But it's interesting to me that we're seeing this great effort and fight going on in Iran with the women demanding their freedoms and their rights while Uranus is back in Taurus again. This will continue because Uranus will be in Taurus for another 2.5 years. But be patient. Try to be responsible. Try to be sober more about life issues. And realize that accountability in Pisces things is what is going to be needed for all of us collectively and individually. Take care.